Hi, welcome back to the Nourishing channel after what would seem a very long time. But I was really eager to record this video because based on what I've experienced over the last few months and what I've heard from a lot of other people is that they've had a lot of experiences with what they would call a mini relapse or feeling some sense of longing to get back to their eating disorder. And because this is a recovery channel, I thought that it would be really helpful to do a video about how to get yourself out of the mindset of relapsing or getting back to the point where you're really ill and trying to find the motivation to get yourself back on track and ultimately not fall back into the claws of anorexia or bulimia or whatever other eating disorder that you suffer from. So mini relapses or full-blown relapses in recovery are really common. And they're a lot more common than we actually think. And I know from my experiences of recovery that it's not just a straight vertical line, but it's all over the show. There's no point A to point B. It's just what I would call sometimes very circular. So in my experience, recovery took a long time, and it was also made up of lots of wins, but also mini relapses as well. And you might have experienced this too, but for me, I just got stuck and entrenched in, moving 2 steps forward, running back to my eating disorder, then moving 3 steps forward and running a little bit back to my eating disorder. And all throughout that journey, I think I felt so scared to let go of anorexia or some form of eating disorder restriction because I didn't really know who I was. And I think this is a massive reason why a lot of relapses happen, is that you may gain a certain amount of weight, or you may be classified as recovered by a health professional, or you start to feel as though you're able to, live your life again, go out for cake and biscuits and meals out and go to cafes. And yet something feels missing, and it sometimes feels as though that you need something back in your life. And that's often the case because we don't feel that we can cope in this big wide world, because half the time we've spent revolving our life around an eating disorder, all the rituals and routines that go along with that. So when we finally get to the edge of recovery and really experiencing life, that can feel so scary. And a similar thing happened to me at the end of last year, where I had got myself so well enough to the point where I was able to go to Disney World in Florida, eat all the types of food I wanted, ice cream, cake every day, eat anywhere I liked, and I'd been in a really good place in recovery for a long time. However, forwarding on a few weeks from that, after Christmas and coming into 2019, I had a little bit of a mini crisis, if I'm honest. And I'll hold my hand up and say here, I didn't have a good relationship with food over the last few months, even though all throughout my recovery I've been a massive advocate for, eating well, getting to a psychologically good place and living life to the full. But I think I'd come to a point where I'd achieved so much in recovery that it overwhelmed me and scared me to the point where I didn't know what was next. I didn't know what else to do if recovery wasn't my main goal. And I also had a bit of a family crisis as well. In the midst of all that going on, what I'm so used to doing, and it's the worst coping technique in the world, is to stop focusing on the bigger picture but to microscopically manage life. Micromanaging might involve starting to count calories again, just becoming aware of healthy foods, trying to, cut out certain food groups or manage when and where you'll eat certain meals. And for a brief spell, the whole world seems to be shut out. It feels blurred rather than in your face. And I personally suffer from anxiety, so food and anxieties tend to go hand in hand. And when my anxiety levels are up here, I know that if I try and control my food in some way, then I can numb my anxiety out. And even though I have written a book on this topic and have tried for many years to fully recover and have tasted what full recovery looks like, none of us are immune to feeling like we need to run back to something that we've used to cope for years, decades, or even more or less most of our lives. So that's my honest part, and it's probably something I'll cover a bit more in depth in another video. But how can we, from this place of you know, feeling like we're running back towards an eating disorder, pull ourselves back and not have to go to the point where we're being admitted into hospital or getting to a stage where things are so bad that we become physically unwell and very, very psychologically unstable. So at this point in the video, I'd also like to mention that it doesn't matter what weight you are to be in need of recovering from a mini relapse, because just like any relapse or any eating disorder, it happens at all weights, shapes and sizes. And I haven't lost any weight over the last few months, or if I have, I haven't noticed. But it was just my whole thought patterns around food had started to change, and I felt that need and urge inside me to start needing to control food. But before that got out of hand and me thinking, right, I need to take myself back to a really ill point in order to get help, I've said that I deserve to help myself no matter what I weigh or how bad I am, in inverted commas. And the same goes for yourself. So if you feel that your relationship with food is treading on thin ice, or you're becoming slightly more obsessed with certain foods, or skipping certain foods, avoiding certain items on a menu, then that's a wake-up call for us all to say, hang on, I am not living my life to the best right now. And although life feels really scary, and there may be a few things we don't want to face, and we don't want to live a life without our eating disorder, we absolutely must. And I can't home in on that point more, because I know when I'm in a good place mentally and my eating disorder doesn't exist, most of the time, like 99% of the time, I'm so happy. And although life has its negatives, I'm able to fully embrace life and be creative. I feel so at one with life and being able to go outside and go out with friends. But it's that 1% of the time where life just sometimes grabs you by the throat, or something makes you feel really anxious, and we can feel so lured to go back to something that's actually a really negative coping mechanism. But we do not need an eating disorder in our lives. No matter what your brain may tell you or what anorexia may tell you, it's just not necessary. And there are many other coping techniques that we can use. However, coping with food and using that continually, we know that in another 10 years' time, 20 years' time, if we continue to do this and go along this road of, you know, partly having the eating disorder on our shoulder, or just in the doorway, or just ready to hold our hand next time life goes through the shit, let's say, then we're never ever going to be able to get to a place where we can fully break free. The problem is, breaking fully free is scary. And I've talked about this in another video, but when you leave anorexia or any restrictive form of eating disorder behind, it leaves a massive void in your life. But we need to fill that void with other things and not go back to square one and use it to feed off us, because that's what eating disorders do. They feed off us in the long term. So getting back to the main point of the video before I end up blabbering on for another hour probably, is to say, if you are in a place right now of feeling like you want to go back to your eating disorder, even if you're having a few weeks, days or months of slowly creeping back towards your eating disorder, then we really need to address why we're doing that and how can we pull ourselves back. So one thing that massively helped me was to be really honest. And it's really hard in the social media world where we're all expected to be a really strong advocate for eating disorder recovery or mental health positivity, body positivity. But actually we have to sometimes hold our hands up and say, I am not okay, and that's okay. Because despite how much of an advocate we may be and how positive life may be 95% of the time, there will be that 5% where our brain gets hold of us and we need to do something about it. And it's good to give ourselves permission to cry, feel awful, feel so tied up with anxiety. But importantly, being honest with that, and even being honest with other people about how we're feeling, is key. So from my experiences over the last few months, what I've tried to be more honest with is with the people really close to me, is just to voice how I am struggling. And not necessarily just with food itself, but just my anxiety levels, feeling really low in mood. And that has helped me massively to feel understood, to feel validated in need for support. So I'm currently soon going to be getting some support for my own psychological well-being, And for a long time I felt ashamed of even sharing that with my boyfriend, let alone my parents or you guys on here who I'm meant to be this social advocate for eating disorder recovery. But through all of that, I need to be honest and say when we feel like we're being lured back, I have a duty, we have a duty to get ourselves well. And something else that's really helped me is, although my food intake's not ever been driven to a critical level again, it's still stayed fairly normal, is for me to just temporarily give my food control to somebody else, because right now I know for a fact I won't 100% of the time make the best decisions for me, even if it involves, oh, I'm going to choose the healthy sandwich over the sandwich I usually buy, or I'm going to say no to a meal out with friends because I prefer to make my own meal in. Having someone else take control, in my case my parents and also my boyfriend, it takes the weight of focusing on food off me, and it allows me to focus on my mental sanity and my mental well-being, which is ultimately the underlying force why I'm needing to use food for that little bit of control. So although this relapse, if you could call it that, is the smallest I've ever had, it is still in some way restricting my life, so I'm making an effort to deal with it and get back on track. Another thing that's really helped, and what may help you, is to write a diary that's about logging meals, you know, maybe not calorie intakes, you don't need to do that, but logging meals, and then also looking at your anxiety levels at the time that you eat food or anything that's going along around that time. So when I've done this, and it's something that I often do whenever I feel a little bit low or as though anxiety is getting the better of me, I often see a very clear pattern, and that's that when my anxiety gets sky high or I feel low in mood, is that directly in some way affects my eating pattern. And it might not be as drastic as skipping a whole meal, but as I said before, eating disorders are very insidious and they can seep their way in through any small crack, and it could involve having a drink of water instead of a cup of tea, or having a piece of toast with peanut butter instead of having a chocolate bar. And on the outside, even though you're eating and nourishing yourself, you're not nourishing yourself to your optimal potential. So to get away from that, I've really started to focus on being creative these last few weeks, focused on painting, writing, and although I've not really shared this with other people, it's something I've needed to do to just fuel my own mental health. Even if some days all I've done is sit in a cafe and draw, I know that that is my ultimate achievement for the day. I've not been able to do anything really productive or go out there and be Nelson Mandela and save the world, but I have tried my ultimate best to keep myself well. And I'll be honest, it's not been able to happen 100% of the time because I have slipped up here and there, but right now I feel in a really good place with food, and I'm continuing to challenge myself and break even more boundaries in terms of fear foods that might have creeped back in. But I know I'm doing this not just for me, but also for the people that I want to serve now and in the future, because I can't be a role model or honest role model for other people if I'm tripping over my own carpet and not taking my own medicine. And unfortunately, eating disorders may be a lifetime battle. I don't know, because I haven't gone through my whole life yet, and I don't know whether it'll fully leave me for good. However, from the past, I do know that my eating disorder has left me for significantly large amounts of time, and those large amounts of time are getting longer and longer and longer. So even though this is a little mini blip in the pan, or you may experience a blip in the pan of your own, or feel like you're needing your eating disorder again, that doesn't mean that that is going to be your life forever. For all we know, it just may take a few more mini relapses to fully get well. But that boils down to your persistence and my persistence, and not giving up on ourselves. Because if we give up on ourselves, how on earth can we ever learn to look after other people or really fulfill our own mission in life, whatever that may be? So I invite you to just take a leaf out of our own books, because we know what we should be doing deep down inside, but life does get in the way. Don't get yourself back to square one and make yourself really ill. Like, wherever you are, you have the permission to catch yourself when you fall and pull yourself back to safety. No one out there will do it for me. Even though I can give my meal plan to somebody else or someone else to take control, ultimately in the long run, I'm going to have to care for me, and you're going to have to care for you as well. And the world is big, it's scary, it's going to pull the carpet from under yours and mine's feet from time to time. So it's our opportunity now to get ourselves back on track. Maybe find how your own anxiety levels are fitting in with your eating patterns, or looking at, is there some wider issue that's affecting your eating or thoughts around body image and food. And if we can nip it in the bud now, we're going to stop it from escalating. And no one wants to drink 40 juices again, or 40 sips or energy drinks that taste like, I'm not going to swear right now, but you all know how they really taste. What we really want to do is live off life and live off moments and experiences, and to go on holiday when we want, be there for others when we need to be, and not revolve our lives around food. Because food's important, but it isn't the whole of life. The whole of life is us being entirely present in the world. And we all know we can't do that if we're obsessing about food or in a relapse moment. But I just want to hit on one more key point, is that I mentioned before, we need to catch ourselves when we fall. You don't have to have fully fallen off the cliff. But if you notice that you're veering near the edge, now is the time to say, look, let's stop, let's take a moment, let's withdraw from lots of agendas that aren't really important, and let's turn the focus inwards on ourselves and ask, what can we do to either give away food control or take back charge of our mental health, because now is the time to get back in the driving seat of your own life, and that's exactly what I'm doing right now. So I hope you've enjoyed this video or have got something helpful from it. I'm really sorry it's been a little bit of a negative video, or I've had to expose some of my own personal truths, which is something I find really hard to do. But I just thought I'd be really honest with you, and just also hold my hand up and say, if you want to reach out for some support, I'm still here too. And if you want to do that, you can message me on my Instagram at nourishingroots_roots, or visit me on my website at www.nourishingroots.com. In the meantime, I'm going to wish you a great week about getting back on track with yourself, challenging fear foods, and getting back in the driving seat of your own life. So on that note, I bid you farewell and have a fab week.